Hello, everyone. This is Jamie Flinchbaugh, host of People Solve Problems, and I have a guest with us today, Liz Guthridge. Liz, how you doing?
Great. How about you?
I'm doing fantastic. So, little bit of introduction for you, just a bit of a brief. So you run Connect Consulting Group as a leadership coach who combines neuroscience and vertical stage development to help individuals grow and develop. Consultant works with both individual behavior change and organizational culture change. So topics that are near and dear to my heart. And, we've known each other quite a long time now, but really haven't had much of a chance to collaborate. So glad to have you here on the show.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So, you've worked in a lot of different domains, and of course, being on the consulting and coaching side, worked with a lot of different companies. I want to talk to you about sort of ideation and brainstorming, whether it's your own work, which you've evolved quite significantly over the years, or it's with your clients and engagements there. So how do you think about approaching ideation or brainstorming in your work?
So, people always want to think of brainstorming as getting into an office or around a conference table and all throwing ideas at one another. And the research shows that is not a really effective way to do it. The research shows that it's really valuable for people to do some good thinking on their own in ways that they prime their brain to use their unconsciousness. So, for example, you decide to, you want to be thinking about solving a particular problem or coming up with a new way to expand a product or whatever, is to think about some issues and then just go off and do something. Take a walk, go to the gym, whatever, and let your unconsciousness work. Because when you think about it, most of our really good ideas come from when we're in the shower, when we're cooking, walking, whatever, because the brain really needs to have that unconsciousness make connections that we don't often see. And to do that, you need to be not thinking about the problem. You need to be in a positive state of mind, and you need to just let your brain work on its own. And then just make sure that you have a way to capture some of the ideas that you think. And then you can especially if you're working on a team, various people have been doing that on their own, and then come together and share what you've been doing and talking about, and then give yourself some more space to do that.
Yeah, I want to ask more about that from a technique standpoint because I'm fully supportive of that. One of the chapters in my book is called Integrating Intuition. And some of it's not all about ideation, it's about any part of it, but some of it's that kind of advice. How do we access our intuition in the problem solving or improvement work? And some of that is of course to walk away from it and allow room for your other parts of your brain to engage. So one of the techniques, I have experimented with over the years is often on Miro or those other tools, we'll kind of kick off the process and then let people brainstorm asynchronously, where Miro is simply as you pointed out, how do we collect the ideas, but they're doing it independently, where they can work best. So from a technique or an approach standpoint, how do you best tap into that, whether you're a facilitator or a guide or doing it for yourself?
Yeah. So it definitely helps people to do things on their own, because it also helps the introverts feel like they can contribute rather than being overwhelmed by the extroverts. However, I think what's really helpful is to be able to do it over a longer time period so as to let people figure out when's going to be the best time for them, if it's nighttime, daytime, when they're outdoors or at the gym or whatever. So it's not just, feeling like you're at a table being forced to write notes on sticky notes. Sometimes that can help, but generally at a later stage.
Mm-hmm.
And also too, people really like some autonomy. So if you are able to give people some autonomy about when they and where they come up with their ideas that they then bring to you, just the nature of having that autonomy, that choice, could make them more creative.
Yeah. No, I like the autonomy. I know it works, for me. Certainly, I kind of uh, like my ability to engage in it the way that I the way that I prefer to. And yeah, the introverts in the room can get crowded out, and that's often why good facilitation skills was were so important. Only in the sense that we're making the most out of a bad situation, being that we are stuck in a room trying to get done the work.
Right. And if I have to do that, I will often give people post-it notes and just say, take 15 minutes and write one idea per post-it note. And then we're going to post it along the wall. We'll do a gallery walk.
Right, right, exactly. So sort of a secondary problem that presents, and I'm just curious if you have a take on this. Uh, you know, Having it go slow, taking the time to do it. A lot of people want to move fast. They have some urgency. They kind of their pushback on deliberate approaches is, I don't want this to take too long. So how do you push back or make the case for taking the time to do this?
Well, it doesn't really take that much longer because if you're doing it from an asynchronous standpoint and give everybody the assignment that in the next 36, 48, 72 hours, you're going to come up with some ideas. And then having some rigor about how you evaluate the ideas.
Yeah, and I like that a lot. It's adding the rigor on the back end, right? It's once we have the ideas that can come from anywhere, then let's be rigorous about the evaluation, the discernment around those ideas before we move forward.
Right. Because
Um,
if you rush everybody at the beginning, you really run the risk you're not going to get some really creative out of the box thinking.
right. Yeah, we get a little more. I like to talk about momentum, right? And so you have an early idea. It seems like it might work, and you get some momentum around that. You don't even consider all these other ideas that may be way better, and probably are in most cases. So all of that kind of implies just the idea of discovering new ideas, testing what might work, things like that. Really implies a learning mindset to problem solving and improvement, which isn't always easy. People sometimes have a results orientation to sort of an execution mindset. How do you think about a learning mindset? How do you encourage or really almost require to get people to adopt a learning mindset through all of this?
Yeah. So a learning mindset really starts with a growth mindset. And this idea that you are being very curious and you're wanting to know more. And I mean, Carol Dweck, who came up with this idea of mindset years ago, talks about, this idea between a growth mindset in which you're always thinking that you can improve, which really fits lean really well, as opposed to a fixed mindset in which you're trying to prove that you're successful and not really wanting to grow. Now, she really makes the point that we are all on a continuum. So we need to look for ways to encourage a growth mindset when we are at work. And so this idea of encouraging people to be curious, asking questions of themselves and as of others. And these days, I think especially not always accepting the status quo. In fact, challenging the status quo and ensuring that you've got a culture that you can, just because we've always done it this way, doesn't mean we need to continue to do it this way. We can question that.
Yeah.
And then I think the other thing too is giving a lot of praise for those who role model the behavior you want, because people can be very, what's the word I want? They really want to hold on to the praise rather than commend people. And the value of recognizing people for practicing curiosity and challenging things and all of that is that it gives them a hit of dopamine and they're going to want to continue to do it again and again. And you, as the leader, when you commend people, you're going to feel better, especially when you see the smiles on their face and the reactions that they're getting. And you realize, oh, that's really going to help us have a continuous learning orientation.
Yeah. I certainly like that. I also, when I talk about behaviors in the book, that curious mindset, I think that learning mindset, I believe, is an essential uh, behavior to go along with problem solving. Um, in terms of creating it, and I certainly agree, it's along a continuum, so it's not just turn it on or off. Um, but do you believe people need to sort of choose to go into a growth mindset and a learning mindset, sort of consciously choose it? Or do we simply encourage them to practice that mindset and they sort of learn it through that? Or is it a combination of those?
It's a combination. It's also making sure people have space to do this. And that's where we often get ourselves so wound up at work, regardless of the setting, if it's in an office, if it's on the plant floor, if it's in a home office or whatever, that we have to be scheduled to the minute.
Mhm.
And it's important to, if there are things that you really need to think about and do, my personal opinion, again, everybody's different, but I'm a really big advocate of blocking time on your calendar for some thought time. And you don't necessarily have to be at your desk or in a particular area, but giving yourself some space. And I reason why I'm such a big believer of that is that when I do a lot of coaching, and so many leaders say to me, one of the things I love most about coaching is having this space to think and try out new ideas.
Yep. No, I huge fan of that. I create space in my calendar. I had to make a big decision last week. I actually sat in the chair I'm in now and with a journal and notepad and sketching it out, laying it out. So big believer of that. And sometimes it's physical space. Sometimes it's changing your environment to put yourself
Yes.
in a different headspace. Um, a lot of leaders struggle with that because whether it's of their own doing or not, they're just so, as you mentioned, booked to the minute. um, do you have a hack or a suggestion for a first step for people that because a lot of people recognize the value, but they struggle to even take that first step. Do you have a hack or a suggestion around people making that first step?
Yeah, the suggestion I have is to be really aware of your values and your priorities and look at your calendar to see if they're reflected in that. So, for example, if you really believe that you need regular physical exercise or some type of activity to feel grounded and performing at your best, one of the things you can do is put those exercise spots on your calendar first. At times, you may need to book something over them, but at least that will give you a good reminder. Okay, I have to give up this space at, X time on Wednesday, but I'm going to find time later in the week or earlier in the week for it instead. And so that makes it more intentional for you.
Hmm.
And that really can help an awful lot because when you talk with people, a lot of the things they treasure and value the most, like exercise or time with family or things like that, are the first things to go. And that is not going to be healthy for them from a productivity standpoint in terms of really working efficiently and effectively, especially effectively. And so it's important to value that.
Yep. I really like how you started with values leading into the calendar, right? Because I used to say, I still say this, is that we never get everything done on our calendar, right? That just doesn't happen. So there's a line of stuff that gets done and stuff that doesn't. And where do we draw that line depends on our value. And some of those decisions may be habitual and old, but if we're saying we don't have time for reflection, but we do have time for the budget meeting, that's suggesting that we value the budget meeting over that reflection. And somewhere we have to look at our values and say, does my calendar reflect that? So I love
Mhm.
that starting suggestion. to get going. Um, Now you mentioned coaching. You do a lot of coaching with individuals, groups. Part of that has to include some assessment. Their mindsets, their values, as you mentioned, their capabilities. How do you go about assessing the person that you're coaching?
So a lot of it will go to what they are coming to me for coaching for. So, and what they really want to get out of it and what they want the type of assessment to do. So I've been doing a lot of work more recently with people who are individuals, I should say, who want to really grow and be a whole person and not feeling they're bifurcated in many different ways. And for that, that's where I really like the vertical stage development work because it really addresses who you are from a doing standpoint and who you are from a being standpoint. I mean, what are your values? What, again, back to, are you living your values? Are your values in alignment with your thoughts and your behaviors? Because that really helps you be authentic. And so there are several things like the leadership agility assessment, the complete values, a number of different instruments like that that will give you some insights.
Excellent. So, using that helps you understand, quickly kind of what you're dealing with and working with. And
That helps the person give some insight too,
right.
because one of the things that we at work until really recently, and still not everybody's doing it, are paying more attention to values and character and having you feel like you are a huge being. You're like you're a human being. You're not a machine.
Right. So, just on that, as you have conversations as they go through these assessments, and you take use one of these tools, um, how much is it about understanding versus improvement? Right? Do I just understand myself better, or is it more about finding gaps that I need to go improve and sort of close the gap on?
Yeah, it really varies by individual. I will say, though, that for leaders today, it's especially important to be as self aware as possible and make sure that you are leading yourself.
Mhm.
Because if you have challenges leading yourself, you're going to have real challenges leading others. And when I talk about leading yourself, knowing as much about yourself as possible in terms of like how much sleep do you need in order to function well? What types of things do you need to avoid that will trigger you and get you emotionally ratcheted up that it's going to be hard for you to concentrate?
Yep.
So all of these things, and I mean, so it's let me back up just a second. So I trained as a brain-based coach, and in more recent years, I've been studying the field of neuroplasticity. And one of my big ahas, which has been supported by the research, is that our physical health is so valuable to us. And that's, if you're physically healthy, that helps you get more capacity for your work
Hmm.
or whatever else you want to do.
Right.
And so if you are denying yourself, especially the top three, sleep, movement, or exercise, but I mean, in some cases, it's just movement and a good diet, you are really hurting yourself from a work performance perspective, as well as a life performance perspective.
Yep. As somebody who spent lots of time in conference rooms, stuck on airplanes, not sleeping with late arrivals, and eating whatever I could find in an airport, I recognize all of that, and
Yeah.
all the things I did to harm myself through my schedule. Um, so how do you adjust then as a coach? How do you make changes? Do you start with a standard approach, or do you make dramatic changes to how you coach depending on what you assess and what you're in the leader you're working with?
Yeah. So I am a big advocate of very um, tailored coaching so as to treat each person as the individual they are. And so that becomes part of like what they want to work on. And oftentimes, I mean, I'm really pleased because a lot of the corporate clients I'm working with give their coachees or their employees a lot of leeway into what they want to work on. And so that is really, really helpful because again, if you feel like you've got the autonomy to choose what you want to work on, that is going to be a big driver for you to want to make improvements.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so for a lot of my coachees will talk about what their ideal self is and, going out 10, 15 years or so and then working backwards on how to get there. And again, often including their values. And values can change, but for the most part, values can be pretty steady. Mm-hmm. And getting grounded in that can help a lot. And then figuring out what things that they think that they are interested in doing that can make a difference. And then, working on one or two, maybe three, but no more than 3 goals at a time, because it's just, you're not going to get there.
Yeah. Yep. Well, that sounds like a great approach. I agree with the premise of the individualization. Certainly, as you've shared your perspectives and your practices, I love how much you being a consummate learner kind of came out and how you've evolved your thinking. So really appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your lessons, your perspectives, and your practices. So thanks, Liz.
Thank you, Jamie.